Hey, Spuddies! Potato Whiskey here, and welcome to my positive review of Civilization 7. If you're interested in hearing my negative review or my negative opinions about Civilization 7, there will be a video linked in the description of this video that you can go watch all the bad things I have to say about this game. This video is going to focus on the reasons I think people should buy Civilization 7 on launch. If you reply to this video with some sort of pet grievance that I didn't address in a video that I'm making specifically to glaze and praise Firaxis and Civilization 7, after I tell you that this video will only contain positive opinions and that there's a separate video for negative opinions, I swear to God I might actually lose my mind. The first reason I think people should buy the game is that the game is genuinely really fun to play. Of course, like with any game, there have been moments that I have been frustrated with, or there's problems with the UI, but I come away from every gameplay session wanting to immediately start up a new one. It scratches that itch. I love it when a game inspires me to think about it even when I'm not playing it, and I definitely find myself doing that after playing Civilization 7. I often find myself theory crafting new builds or gameplay strategies around using the many different systems of the game, and the game has many. I think the developers managed to capture the Antiquity Age gameplay incredibly well. That feeling of starting out with a single city, exploring the map, and setting down the foundations of an empire is incredibly well captured. And I found myself having a great time exploring the new gameplay systems and mechanics. Seriously, the game really evokes the feeling of the one more turn when you're in the Antiquity era, to the point where I often feel like that age is just a little bit too short and I need more time to really sink my teeth into it. Now, I do think the Exploration Age isn't quite, executed quite as well as the Antiquity Age, but it is a huge departure from the normal Civilization formula, which I think is worth appreciating in its own right. The game has taken massive risks in trying to evolve its gameplay, and I think some of them paid off with breaking the game up into ages. I genuinely feel like the Exploration Age is a very different age than the Antiquity Age, so I think they nailed it when it comes to that. I do feel slightly pigeonholed into certain gameplay patterns around the distant lands during this age, but I can make calculated decisions to ignore them if I want to, which is nice in of itself. Now, while I do feel that the Modern Age is the weakest of the three ages, I still think it's quite fun. It's just the weakest of the three eras, or the three ages rather, not eras anymore. I think largely that just has to do with the game balance getting out of whack as you continue to stack bonuses from the previous eras and stuff like that. But the big thing is, the Modern Age actually does feel like an age of ideological conflict and industrial advancement, even if it's not how I would have chosen to execute it. I would break the Modern Age up into two ages. There would be the Industrial Age, and they should be their own age. But they've kind of mashed them together into this weird, Ouroboros. That it kind of works. Now, thanks to updated gameplay mechanics for Warfare, I actually really like the warfare in Civilization 7. I've come to expect massive wars during the Third Age because it's the age of ideology. I find the warfare to be a lot less tedious and a lot more interesting than previous Civilization games, Civ 4, Civ 5, Civ 6. It's better than all of those, in my opinion. I think the warfare game is the best. I really think they knocked it out of the park with the new gameplay mechanics. Pretty much everything that has to do with the sort of number crunchy, strategic decision makings, it all tickles my brain. And again, there are always edges of frustrations or balance issues or things like that. I consider these kind of like teething problems, and they're kind of also, a doorbell ringing will always throw you off. This game has a absolutely massive amount of content for a launch title Civilization game, and it has equally large amount of replayability, in my opinion. I understand that this is an area where other people might differ from me. However, I think that from a factual basis, this is like the largest Civ game in terms of the breadth of content we've ever received on launch. That is really interesting to consider, considering we're really only getting from like the ancient age up to the modern age, right? And they're kind of jumbled a little bit. Like, you could parcel out an entire medieval era there, you could parcel out an entire industrial era there, and then there's still room for like multiple extra ages in the game, which is something I hope they consider putting into the game, and I'm sure they will. Based on what they've said, the Civilization developers set out to solve a lot of the community's problems with the game, and I think they delivered on those goals. It's reasonable not to like the goals that they set for themselves, but I think they did as good as a job as they could have by taking such big risks, which they have taken really big risks with the gameplay. I did think that I would have preferred a more classic sort of Civilization experience without the Civ switching and the different chapters of history, but I have to say that the mechanics are slowly growing on me. I think I'm starting to see the vision behind the developers' goals, and I like the direction we're going down. Even if there's a part of me that wishes it wasn't the direction we were going. I've been a fan of Civilization for, maybe not the longest time, but, I have been around a while. But change is always difficult, no matter the medium or form, right, of the change, especially if it's something you care a lot about, right? And this is my job, right? So I kind of do feel a little bit like, I kind of wish we had a more classic Civilization experience. But I'm enjoying what we got, and it's kind of growing on me in a weird way. There are moments where I'm angry with the game, and then there's moments where I'm just having a blast. Which all in all I think is a good. That's what you get. That's what you got to ask for a sequel, I think it's really bad if a sequel is just like you're angry with the game all the time. Whereas if you're having fun some of the time, that's awesome. Now, just to really hammer home on like the level of replayability and content this game has, a single leader in Civilization 7 on launch has like 1,000 different ways they can navigate their way through the ages in terms of combining civilizations. And then you've got to add like mementos on top of that. It starts to become crazy. Now, there are going to be certain combinations, right, that rise to the top in terms of synergy and fun, and even based on the leader and all that sort of stuff. Maybe there'll be like 6 viable ways to play each leader, but there's like 30 leaders or something, or 26. I don't remember exactly how many. That's a huge amount of replayability. And here's the crazy thing for replayability. Even though there's an insane amount of replayability, I actually found myself having the most amount of fun playing the same civ over and over, trying to refine and learn the game, which is insane for replayability. I found myself enjoying playing the same civ build, like for lack of a better term. Like I was just playing Augustus as Rome, like a lot, and now I've been playing Augustus as like other civs. I think Augustus is my favorite because he's like super good in certain ways and super kind of weird in others. Yeah, I've just been playing Augustus, and I haven't even really touched the other leaders. It's a rare that a civ game will make me want to start like another game of the game playing the exact same leader in Civilization right after I just played them. Usually in Civ 6, like I finish a game as the Kamai and I'm like, I don't want to play Kamai again for a month. But in Civ 7, like I finish, the Antiquity Age as Rome and I'm like, fuck, I want to play another Antiquity Age as Rome. Or like I finish an entire game all the way through to the modern age and I'm like, I want to play another game as all of those exact same civilizations and I want to do it better. So I think there's something about this civilization that I don't know how to put it into like factual words or whatever, but there's a vibe here that I'm really enjoying. Honestly, like during the early press access or whatever, it may as well have been called Civilization 7 Rome Edition with the number of times I played Augustus leading Rome in the Antiquity era. I never got bored of it. I could do it again, and I will. Probably in the background is me playing Augustus with another civ, just because I'm like, all right, now I want to try Augustus with a different civ. So even just like a single leader and a few different civs, or even a single leader and a single live in a single age, was incredibly fun, had a huge amount of replayability, and I think, I think that bodes really well for the game's replayability. I think it also bodes well for the game's amount of content, because I've spent, hundreds of hours playing the game, playing the same few strategies, right? And I'm still not bored of it. And there are thousands and thousands of combinations and permutations to discover. So I think we're going to be playing Civilization 7 for a very long time if it clicks with you. The next reason I think that people should buy Civilization 7 are the graphics. Now, the game is genuinely gorgeous to look at. There are certain things about the graphics that I do not like, with a few exceptions. I'll go over those in the negative opinion video. However, I genuinely think the game looks so damn gorgeous at a glance that it's actually difficult for me to tell when something is a natural wonder and when something is just normal terrain, because the normal terrain just looks so good, it could all be natural wonders for all I know. Genuinely, I think the game is so beautiful that many of the scenes that you create by just playing and placing buildings and units and stuff, they could easily remove as screensavers if you removed like the UI and context cues and stuff like that. Like coastal towns look gorgeous when you zoom in on them. The level of detail and execution on every single tile and building is incredible. They're all dripping with detail and effects. I think the art team did an amazing job on the graphics and terrain and the buildings. I think they said they wanted to capture the look and feel of a diorama, and I genuinely think they succeeded. Like, I have no notes when it comes to the execution of the graphics on that front. I don't like some of the more design decisions. Like, I don't like how the leaders look, and I don't like the lack of color communication in the game's gameplay interface. What I mean is like buildings, like libraries aren't blue. Like science buildings aren't blue, culture buildings aren't sort of a pinkish purple, production buildings aren't like that nice orange color. There's a severe lack of color communication that I got really used to in Civilization 6 that made that game so incredibly readable. And that's the only caveat I really have that you'll find in the negative review, is that like there are certain aspects of the game's design from an art point of view that make it hard to read. Okay, my ability to process the game's landscape is worse than it was in, say, Civilization 6. The music and sound of the game is also fantastic. Every song very strongly evokes the culture that it's attributed to. Some of the songs in there are kind of wacky, and what I mean by that is like it's stuff I would never have heard, and initially was like, wow, this is really different from any sort of music I've ever heard, which is a fun aspect, right? I like that Civilization is becoming a conduit, like a proper conduit to exposure to other cultures and civilizations, both from like a historical knowledge point of view, but also just like music, traditional dress, all that sort of stuff. That's really cool. I like it. I think far and away, the biggest list of reasons that players are going to want to jump into Civ 7, though, have to do with the gameplay updates. There's a huge variety of gameplay updates and innovations that they've brought in. Many of these changes actually make it difficult for me to go back to previous entries into the Civilization franchise. Yesterday I tweeted out, or maybe it was the day before, I tweeted out, the Andy dropping his, Woody toy saying, I don't want to play with you anymore. And it was me uninstalling Civ 6. And I think I just had to uninstall Civ 6 because as much as I love that game, there's kind of two reasons there. One is I don't want to go back and get distracted when Civilization 7's on the table because, we can have an influence on that game. We can really learn it and engage with it. As much as I wish the developers would go back, take some of the lessons from Civ 6 and bring those forward, because I think they didn't bring forward some of the things I really liked about Civ 6. I kind of just have to leave that behind, because if I go back and look at Civilization 6, it actually breaks my heart with how bad the UI in Civ 7 is. But that's something we'll talk a lot more about in the negative review. So like on the gameplay side of things, scouts are just better. Scouts are just like, you could a lot of the decisions that they've made with regards to the gameplay, they could retroactively apply to all of the Civilization games, and it's like objectively improving the game, right? So scouts now have this ability. They have two new abilities that make them really, really important. First of all, they have this sort of like orbital radar scan. It's called like search or something like that. And basically what it does is it increases their vision range slightly at the cost of a movement point. But in addition, it also lets you know if there's any goody huts in the fog of war nearby. So it creates a really interesting decision sort of landscape where you're not only, you're making a sort of interesting interplay between like, do I move a tile or do I move two tiles, or do I move into this rough terrain? Do I move a tile and then search? Do I search in place and then and then they also have another ability called Lookout, which is basically their unique fortify action, which is basically they fortify on a tile and get +1 vision range, which is just so nice. Like again, both of these things could be brought back into previous Civilization games, and it's just nice because basically the way that search works is it's as if your scout moves one tile in every direction from a vision perspective, which is super useful, but it costs you a movement point. So it makes the scouting game, you're less likely to miss goody huts in the fog of war. Your scouting patterns are a lot more thoughtful and interesting to engage with. Yeah, I think scouting is just so much better. There's also cities and towns, right? They've divided cities into cities and towns. I do think there's almost a part of me that wishes there was like an outpost tier that didn't take up settlement slots, because sometimes there's like a random tile in the corner of my empire and I want to be able to claim land that isn't necessarily within 3 range of a city. There's like certain like little foibles like that I sometimes have issues with. But I do think that cities and towns offer a lot of meaningful choice to the player. I do think in an awful lot of the case, converting a town into a city is usually the right decision if you have the micromanagement and the gold and happiness to support it. But you can also just like, no, you just like, I'm going to have a bunch of towns. I really like that I can plonk down a settlement whose entire purpose is to be like a trade outpost or a fortress or a hub town or a X, right? Whatever you want it to be, you can do it with these towns, and it's really cool. It does feel kind of weird going back to previous Civ titles, and it's like you're kind of settling this like aspiring metropolis purely for the purpose of like having extra trade range to reach another player, or claiming like those random ass one tile islands in the middle of the ocean just for the hell of it. So now you can just create a town. It never asks you for a production update. It just tells you it's got growth events and you can buy stuff in it if you want. It's really nice. I love the division between cities and towns. I think it's awesome. That one I would be less certain about, like retroactively applying to previous Civ titles, but I could kind of maybe see it. One of the things I love about Civilization 7, though, are the new independent peoples. Basically, they merged city-states and barbarians from previous games into a single sort of unified system. I like that I can choose to befriend an aggressive camp to get a city-state bonus from them, or easily wipe out a friendly independent people to take their land if they have a juicy city location, right? It feels like such a logical evolution to the system that it could easily be retroactively applied to every Civ game. This is one of those systems where I think this is one of those ones where, like, if they do it different from the way they've done it in this game in the future, they've just done it wrong. The independent peoples and the city-states thing, that is just like, that's how it should be done. That is how it should be done into the future. It's a 10 out of 10 feature, and I have zero major changes that I require to them. There's like a couple of small tweaks that I would maybe like. Things that I would love is like maybe I could subjugate a city-state militarily rather than having to use diplomatic favor. But, you know, a lot of those are like small little like, wouldn't it be nice if? But yeah, I love that I get to choose city-state bonuses. I love the rewards you get for taking out independent people. Everything about the independent people system is really rewarding. They seriously nailed it. Again, this is just how independent people mechanics should be done in the future. I think the diplomacy system is just objectively better than previous Civilization games. While I wouldn't necessarily call it more fun, it's a lot less fiddly and exploitative. A lot of the decisions you're making are much more straightforward. There's less complicated. And when I say complicated, it's not that the system is less complicated. It's more that it's just less fiddly, right? There's a lot less knobs and twitches like, oh, I want to trade you 4 great works for this and blah, blah. And it's just like, hey, you want to do a cultural agreement? Great. You want to do this agreement? Great. And I think that is better than having that weird diplomatic barter table that like the game incentivizes you to exploit. A lot of the balance in like previous Civ games could easily be broken by exploiting trade deals with the AI to the point where that's something I try to avoid doing. I used to do it all the time, but now I don't do it anymore. In Civ 7, it's no longer a problem. Instead, you have to kind of carefully manage your relationship with the AI and parcel out your diplomatic influence to keep yourself safe, but also maintain relationships with city-states and other players and keep yourself set up for warfare and make sure you're defended and ready to go on the offense. And the system feels really nice to use. And yes, it has its moments of frustration. Overall, I'm really happy with how the diplomacy system plays and feels. I think that's another area where we just have fairly strict upgrades. Are there times where I wish I could trade cities? Absolutely. That's what warfare is for. Warfare is for trading cities, okay? Another really awesome gameplay innovation is the army commander system. I really, really enjoy it. I did think at first I wasn't going to like the fact that my units don't level up anymore, but I do think the army commander has revolutionized warfare. It has a huge impact on the gameplay, and it makes it really fun to interact with the army commanders, you know, packing units up, moving them around the map, or using automatic reinforcement button. It's all really... It has both the potential to minimize the amount of micro that you have to do, but also, like, I have found some pretty micro-heavy strategies where I bounce my units in and out of my army commander, where I'm dancing them around the battlefield, creating fortifications and flanking positions. And I think land and air army commanders have a bigger impact on the game than naval commanders, although that's probably map dependent, right? Like on a water map, you're going to see a lot more from naval commanders. But all 3 types of commanders are really interesting to play and really shape the gameplay in meaningful ways, which I think means that they basically succeeded at their goals. Now, I do miss promoting my unit, and also I'm a huge fan of the Civ 4 style of promotion of units, where you can have like a unit that's been around since the ancient era that just ends up with like giga, uber, mega promotions. I will say this, army commanders kind of scratch that same itch enough to where I don't really think about it anymore. There are a couple of times where, you know, a particular unit of mine has like fought for like 60 turns in a row, and I'm like, damn, dude, you should have been getting like a veteran medal. You know, that's something they could maybe add to the game or something. Like, oh, this unit has participated in 10, 25, 50 combats, plus 1 combat strength for being a veteran. You know, that would be kind of cool. Army commanders, units, everything, it's all better. It's all way better, in my opinion anyway. There are no more builders in the game. When I initially realized that builders and workers were gone from the game, I thought this was actually a bad gameplay innovation. I thought this was like, we were innovating in a negative direction, right? I was a little bit disappointed with it. I do have to say though, after spending a few, 100 hours with the game, I don't really miss them, and I don't need them back. While they were satisfying to micro around carefully, I don't even really think about them anymore. So I think this is straight up just, I was wrong. I think no builders is better. And I just think that this is another selling point of the game now. That just like, hey, remember how micromanaging builders was a pain in the ass? You don't have to do that anymore. The game's better now. And sort of a similar feature here actually is I was initially taken aback by the legacy paths and the leader attributes and the civilization switching and the victory conditions and the legends and the meta progression and all this stuff. And I've kind of now come around to the point of view that these are actually kind of selling points to the game, if for no other reason than they're like fresh and they're new and they're interesting. I have heard a lot about people saying like, oh, Humankind 2 in the last few months, and I think some of those criticisms are legitimate. I think it's a very lazy criticism to make. I think criticize, don't just be like, oh, the developer is copying Amplitude's homework. It's like, okay, bro, Jesus, like make a real criticism there. Rhetorically, it's fine. It's just like, I find it to be a very uninteresting. What I don't like about it is that it's a very uninteresting criticism, because instead of like, because what it's meant to be is just someone going like, yeah, it is like Humankind 2. Whereas if I go like, no, it's very clearly different for all of these reasons. I look like the guy in the meme with the like the nerd, and then the person's like, you're just a fanboy. And I'm like, no, fuck you, dude. Anyway, I just don't think it's a good criticism to say Humankind 2. I think it's a good criticism to say that you didn't like how Humankind did the cultural thing, and that is a reason you don't like the way that Civ, that you think you might not like the way that Civ does it, but you also have to engage intellectually with the idea that the Civ switching that they do in Civilization 6 is very different. Very, very different. Like, so much different. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it. I've been hearing that a lot in the last few months, and it gets old, okay? Listen, there are things that are worth criticizing about the Civ switching mechanic, okay? I don't like that the leaders don't look at each other, okay? Humankind did that too. They did that weird, like, oh, have both leaders on the screen. No, I want one leader on the screen talking to me directly. I really don't like that decision that they made. I don't like it. I think the game does lose something as a result of the new legacy paths and victory conditions, right? Mainly that the victory conditions and the legacy paths, they're really oppressive on the gameplay, to where I feel like I'm following a prescribed path rather than finding one to my objective. But I realize now that they've just made the prescribed path to success more, not discreet, more overt, because there was always a prescribed correct action to take in Civilization. Like, don't settle there because X, Y, like right? So now, but they're saying like, okay, look, here's what you have to build 7 wonders this age. It's up to you to figure out which wonders and how to do it. And I'm like, actually, you know what? That's kind of cool. I've started to come around to it. And because you get different objectives in each age, it's interesting. Because rather than like on turd 1, I'm like, I know my exact path to victory. I need to maximize my science output. I need to get this stuff, this. I'm like, okay, what am I doing? What's my goal for this age? What am I doing in this age? And then you kind of, that's the tier 1 sort of understanding. But then you can also project that forward. It's like, okay, I'm going to do a scientific age 1 because I'm going to take this bonus and this bonus, and I want that ability, and I need this for the middle, for the middle chapter, and I need that for the last chapter, so I'm going to do this in the first and second chapter. And it actually kind of becomes like a really interesting dance in your head that's going on. I do think the system is an improvement over what came before, even if I find the actual victory conditions themselves to be a little bit lackluster. One of the big areas though, when it comes to like the legacy path systems, that I think is a huge missed opportunity, was that the developers could have given more civilizations unique ways to interact with the milestone systems. Only Mongolia has a unique way of scoring a military legacy path in the exploration age, to my knowledge. That's the only unique way to do it. There's huge potential for future and current civilizations. Like, what if there was a civilization that got credit for the wonder, for the antiquity era wonder thing, by settling adjacent to a natural wonder, right? In addition to building wonders, but they get a wonder production penalty or something, right? Like, there's lots of really interesting ways you could have done that. And I think that is something worth exploring at some point. I think there's a huge potential in ideas like that. I don't necessarily think that's what they should put into the game, but like, I want to see more. I like the idea of more civilizations having unique paths through the legacy paths. I think that's kind of cool. As long as the developer can come up with like interesting goals and gameplay mechanics, and it's maybe not too many. Here's ultimately, I just want to see more alternative legacy path options. I think it's cool. I want to see more. The effect of legacy paths is felt kind of positively on the game, but victory conditions are really anticlimactic, and that's kind of what legacy paths lead you to, which makes the system as a whole just feel kind of blah. But I'll leave, it's fine. It's fine. I was initially hesitant about the new Civ switching mechanic. I've kind of come around to it. And now it's one of the parts of the game I actually really enjoy. I think the fact that you get to keep some of your civilization's bonuses through the ages adds a lot of fun to the choice. You also have to achieve certain objectives to unlock a specific civilization that you might want to combo. Being able to have a Roman unique quarter quietly providing a small amount of bonuses throughout the game is very satisfying. I understand why people don't like it, and I do think the system is worth criticizing, and honestly, I get why people might still not like it even after they play around with it. I think the system does what it sets out to do really well. Just people just might not like it. And people might not like what it was setting out to do, rather. And that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I found it to be fun. It wasn't jarring at all. I think the worries about it were slightly overstated, and I actually think it's quite fun once you play around with it. While I don't love narrative events, this is like the last gameplay innovation we'll talk about. While I don't love narrative events, I do think the Civilization developers struck a nice balance between being interesting and useful, but not being too overbearing on the gameplay. I'm sure other people are going to disagree with me. I found the narrative events less annoying than I usually do in games. As someone who is a narrative event hater, I think for most people, narrative events are going to be a huge selling point for the game, since they're quite fun to read for most people. Personally, I find them boring and tedious and annoying, but that's just the way that I am personally. But I actually think, even, like, to put this in context, I listed a thing that I hate as a positive about the game. Okay, I hate narrative events, but it's a selling point of the game because they're nice. They did a good job, and I'm annoyed that they did a good job. Damn them. I think this next section, we sort of covered gameplay updates. I think this next section is going to be the area where I will probably get the most criticism. I could be wrong, right? But I actually think some of the criticism of this section is really valid. People will often say things like, it's not our responsibility to develop a game, or I didn't buy potential. And those are perfectly valid things to say. However, I would like to just point out that I think it would be a lot worse if there was a section of a review called Potential Shaping the Game and Firaxis Track Record in the negative review, because that would imply the game has no potential, players won't be able to shape the game, and Firaxis has a bad track record, right? I'm sure that there are people who will disagree with me on this section. That's totally fine. This is very much so a vibes kind of section, so I won't take it too personally. I think video game development has changed in the last few decades, right? But the mentality of a lot of consumers and customers haven't really adjusted to those changes. And, like, why should they? There is an expectation, right? A reasonable expectation that when you buy a product, you're buying a finished product and getting a complete product, which is, again, an entirely reasonable expectation from a prescriptive point of view. That is how things should be. And that is how things can be if you just wait to buy the game. From a descriptive point of view, though, the world has changed. Or in other words, video games are developed differently from how they used to be developed. In previous video game generations, games were developed in an opaque fashion, right? Where player feedback or knowledge about the game was rare until the game launched. And developers wouldn't really be able to update the game unless they launched a sequel or an expansion pack. At least this is true in the age before, like, online updates and stuff like that. But with the introduction of, like, early access and online patching, developers could specifically sell games, right, with early access that weren't finished, because the goal is to fundraise and to gather feedback so they can improve the game. I think early access actually led to us getting a lot more good games, because often what would happen before early access were games would just get cancelled or rushed out in an unready state and never get patched again. And the community would have to make their own patches and stuff like that. And, well, look, stuff like that still happens. I think the world that we live in now, like the landscape of video games, are more interesting for a consumer. We live in a time where we have unprecedented access to seeing how the sausage is made when it comes to how video games are made. And that requires a little bit of a mental shift on the behalf of the consumer. Video games has gone from an art form that is consumed to one where the art is experienced, created, and shaped through crowdsourced methods, all continuously in a continuum, right? I actually think it can be a lot more interesting than simply consumable media. I think this is an interesting place that we are in. There's nothing wrong with consumable media and games being there's nothing wrong with a game coming out and being a finished product and that's it. Like, that's fine. But I think there's an interesting potential here, because Civilization 7 has a huge amount of potential. I think Civilization 7 has delivered on many of its promises. Oftentimes when people say a game has potential, they usually mean the game is bad right now. I want to be clear. Civilization 7 is a good game. It has problems and needs to be improved, which, again, I will be going over in my negative review. But I think it's genuinely a good game, made all the more exciting for me, or indeed a future-looking consumer or customer that's interested in participating in the game's journey. I might be a little bit biased here, right? It's my job to play Civilization. It's my job to play video games. But I'm really excited for the future of Civilization 7. I think people should be excited to be a part of the game's journey. Look, Firaxis' track record isn't, ironclad, absolutely perfect, but I do think it's generally good, which gives me a lot of confidence in recommending the game and encouraging people to buy it and participate in the shaping the game's future. I don't think you should buy, if you're expecting a fully finished, complete game title, I don't know if you should buy the game right now. But if the idea of being like, ooh, I get to play something that's like, foot out the gate, it's a really good game, but like, wait till you see where it is in like a year, that's going to be a really interesting journey. And if that journey excites you, jump right in, man. But if that, you know yourself better, right? Now, my goal right now is to optimize the community's ability to shape the game. And I'm going to inform people as to what I think is the best place to shape the game. Before I continue, I want to apologize to 2K and Firaxis because I'm about to, potentially about to unleash a whirlwind on your support team. Some of the best places to discuss Civilization 7 so that developers can see it are on social media websites like Reddit r/Civ and the Civ Fanatic forums, both of which the developers almost certainly are monitoring, if not responding, okay? If they're not responding, they're definitely reading. However, if you want your feedback on Civilization 7 to be heard and not ignored, you need to go to the 2K support website and write a ticket. They have options for bug reports and straight up just giving feedback or questions about the game. Now, the simple reason that this strategy is incredibly effective is that 2K is the publisher of Civilization, and their parent company, Take-Two Interactive, is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Multi-billion-dollar corporations are often run on vibes, but a well-run organization also runs on data. If the publisher receives 5,000 support tickets complaining about a bug in the game, that becomes difficult to ignore. In this way, by making your feedback about Civilization 7 a data point, you can actually get issues with the game addressed when they might have been put on the back burner because the person who wanted to fix the issue couldn't justify the development time to the production team. The secret sauce to video game development isn't that developers don't care about fixing an issue or improving the game, it's that oftentimes the person who wants to fix the issue and the person who decides which issues get fixed aren't the same person, right? Producers have to parcel out. Managers, they have to parcel out the studio's development time carefully in rank-ordered lists to keep the project on track. If an issue that is important to the game's community is able to generate enough data points, it's actually extremely useful for producers who are not our enemies. They are human. They might deprioritize a development project in the game, not realizing it's actually a big deal to the community. This is obviously a mistake, and it's one that we can help correct by sending feedback tickets about the things that we care about before it becomes a shitstorm, right? Send your feedback in. Feedback, not shitstorms. Let's be that kind of way. That's what I'm saying. Hey, look, also, please remember, be polite when you're sending your feedback tickets, okay? Human beings read them, they compile them, they run analysis on them. So try to be constructive. Don't open the 2K ticket page every time you rage quit Civilization 7 after you lose your capital city, okay? Do, however, include the phrase, "Potato made me do it," or "Big Chungus" in your feedback form so that the support team can trace those back to me and send me angry emails when they make their support inbox overheat. I think it's incredibly exciting that we as a community, we get to participate in the future development of Civilization 7, not as a game developer, but as players. We get to sit here and tell the developer what I like, what I don't like. And they should and will listen. That's particularly unique for me, as I have a much bigger voice than the average player, thanks to my YouTube channel. However, I think that feedback and the voice of the community is deserving of equal note, which is why I'm telling you guys about how to make your feedback into data points, because I want you to also be excited for that process, to participate in that process of shaping the game. Anyway, that's all of the reasons I could think of in about an hour, which is how long it took me to write this video, as to why you should buy Civilization 7. I love you all very much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!